All right. And you can hear me off that mic?
They should be able to, yeah. Everybody, let me know whether or not you can hear Jeff. It doesn't hurt to speak up just in case, Jeff.
How many people do we have online?
So far, 17 people online.
All right. Well, hello, cyber world, and those in the room here. So we're going to talk today about motivational interviewing and motivational enhancement therapy. What is that and how does it work? So I titled the presentation, So You Want to Learn MI-MET, and we'll kind of cover the techniques involved with this, and hopefully that will help fill in some of the blanks if you have in your mind about this piece. Motivational enhancement therapy in itself is a way to work with folks that are struggling potentially with ambivalence, and so we're going to cover those things. But the motivational interviewing techniques are things rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy and pretty much every other form of therapy that you ever learned before. So what I hope is that the skills that we'll look at in the pieces will feel like this is nothing new. The wrapping it all together becomes the new piece. And motivational interviewing, motivational enhancement therapy has been around for a while, so we're going to discuss the history, how this has been used, and where it goes from. And so I'll kick it off by using that tagline on the bottom, saying, I think what I'm hearing you say is that learning MET could potentially help you accomplish some goals with clients, but you're not convinced. And so maybe that's the ambivalent part. So what we're going to do today is talk really about motivational interviewing, motivational enhancement therapy. The big question I want you to ask yourself is, why are you here? What are the skills that you want to pick up? And how do you want to integrate this into the work that you do? As I said, motivational interviewing, motivational enhancement therapy has been around for a while. And we'll dig into some of the history and the folks that invented it or compiled and put it together. And I've got some videos that are hyperlinked into this. And so we may be switching back and forth, and this is internet connected, right?
Correct.
So I should be able to pull down video clips. Though we've even got some of the author, Bill Miller, and we'll dig into that. So who am I and why am I teaching this? My name's Jeff Ryan. You guys, I'm sure, know Stephanie, and so she's my wife. So I've had a loose connection at a counseling source for, I would say, 13 and a half years or so. I don't remember exactly when you started here, but it was after Cecilia was born. Okay, 15. And I've done a number of presentations. I may have even presented this one before. Motivational interviewing, motivational enhancement therapy has traditionally been rooted or used more frequently in the realm of substance use treatment. And I would say probably 15 to 16 years ago became the real buzz term, and you'll go to agencies, providers, or run into clinicians that say, I'm a motivational enhancement therapist, and you know, they'll talk about those things. And what we've learned over time for those that are really into this is that people say it, but they don't really do it. And part of that has to do with the style and the spirit of motivational interviewing and not buying into that or not finding out how to do that. So we're going to take a look at that and dig into that as well. I've done this presentation in different formats with bigger groups in a room, and typically we'll put up poster boards and they'll have Post-it notes to put the questions. Instead, you have Abby, and you get to click a button and send her a chat, and she'll let me know what's going on, and we can dig into that. We'll also try to have some skill practice. So for those of you out in cyber world, that's going to be a little bit difficult. Next month, when I come back, we'll really hammer skills. We'll have some connections over the net for folks to sort of pair up and try some things. Today, I don't know that we'll be able to do that on the fly, so it'll really be you trying to generate some of the techniques and thoughts on your own, and it should work. But generally, we do that in a room of dyads and triads, so we'll see where that goes. So again, to review the agenda, we're really going to look at the underlying principles. We're going to talk about the stages of change. The stages of change is a model that I know I've talked about in other substance use presentations here, but if you haven't heard it, we'll review that. We'll talk about those things. We'll look at what that really is. We're going to talk about the motivational interviewing skills, and there's an acronym called OARS, and so we'll review that and then practice some of those things. Then there's that word ambivalence that I talked about. So we're going to dig into that. What does that mean? And when we have clients that have ambivalence, that is the target audience to be utilizing motivational interviewing technique. And so again, that whole idea of I'm a motivational interviewing therapy and everything we do is based on motivational interviewing, that's great if you have ambivalent clients. Some of our clients come knowing where they need to do the work, and motivational interviewing isn't really something to use. We'll look at the role of rolling with resistance, what that means, and how we actually incorporate that into our sessions. And then we're going to look at readiness. And so again, when we look back at the stages of change, part of that is the readiness to change. And there's some measures to look at that. And so there's a technique called a readiness ruler. So hopefully we'll be able to cover that today. The end of this is stuff that if we don't finish, we'll have in the November presentation. And then we're going to be looking at the change talk and developing a change plan. So in particular, when you look at substance use treatment, clients come in and they may not have decided for themselves they need to make changes. And so when we look at this being used in treatment or probation settings, maybe even the drug courts, and now some health settings have started to do that, it is because we have learned that those people are the ones that may not see the reason to make the changes. But if we engage them, if we connect with them, they are those ones on the fence. There's reasons someone else have given them. And so again, as we review the stages of change, hopefully that'll become clear. But there are times when people have kind of presented for us the reasons to change, and we haven't necessarily adopted them. So we'll try this first hyperlink and see if this goes. If it does, we'll get to see Bill Miller and hear what he has to say. Loading.
You know, may or may not.
Is there a browser?
Let me step up there with you real quick.
Yeah.
It's not going to share that.
Because we just
I forgot
copied
that
that
she
into
had-
the browser.
I forgot that she had a video. You share. We want to share this. It should be working. Share your sound. There you go.
All right.
Should be working for people online now. Yeah, it is.
Bump up the volume or?
Oh. Just need to. Yeah, let's see if it works for us in the room. It should be working for people online. I will not be able to hear anything differently than what you hear. I'm trying to avoid feedback for people here. Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself. In here in the room, we might just have some hellacious feedback. But it should be okay for people online. No, not there.
You cannot unmute yourself because the host.
You're darn straight the host is muted you. This is what I meant, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I said the wrong thing.
I got you.
So.
Overview of your revolutionary approach.
I don't know that it's revolutionary, but,
I know.
often in the addictions field, the model has been you need to put something into the person, or
Yeah,
And that's okay.
okay. But
They're
those
in
are
there.
links that we can all follow
Yeah, you can
later. You can
check
give
those
us,
out
give us the
later.
highlights.
Because they're embedded in the presentation. So if you have the PowerPoint slides, you can type those in, or if you have them electronically, you can do that. So I apologize for that.
As I was setting up, Stephanie even said, you guys don't have any videos. Don't worry about, getting that audio sorted out. So I blame your wife since she's not in the room.
Yeah, right. So how does motivational interviewing actually work? Well, it works when we practice, and we have to practice the skills over and over again. And so that 15, 16 years ago, when I had mentioned that folks started to say motivational interviewing is the creme de la creme, or it's the flavor of the week, and every provider and every agency is using it, you really went to a training, and then there was no follow-up as to what these things actually were. And so you think about counseling training programs. We have internships and supervised experiences and working with folks. A lot of times in the field, once I have my license, I don't want to go back to do that. And so they're finding folks in the field saying, I'm doing motivational interviewing, but when somebody actually would sit down with them and do the supervision, it wasn't there. And so they actually came up with a model to supervise motivational interviewing skills and support those things. And that's where the styles and the spirit of MI came out of. But the big thing is you have to practice, you have to think about some of this stuff, and you actually have to work it into your practice routine, because it's easy to forget, it's easy to kind of just put it on autopilot, think I got this, but in the end it's not living up to the skills of motivation. So I brought a few props along. So this is the book, Motivational Interviewing. This was the second edition. I think this was published in the late 80s by Bill Miller and Stephen Rollman. So we had that video up for a brief second. That was Bill Miller. They're at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And so they worked these things out by really taking a look at what worked in the world of treatment and recovery when dealing with folks that weren't sure they wanted to change, and found that focusing on this ambivalence was really the start of those things. So if you ever want to read something, it's fairly lengthy, but it's a good start for how motivation works and how to use those. And really everything's based on this. And so that was his little video to sort of set that up and put it in place. Say, here's why we do this, here's how we do it. So you can watch that. It's 4 minutes out there. So the definition of ambivalence really is that we haven't made a decision. We're sitting on the fence. And if you have someone that you're working with coming into therapy that either thinks changes need to be made, but isn't willing to do that, we might be able to shift the balance. And so when doing that, there's some skills to help. And it's already mentioned the readiness ruler. So we'll talk about that. And then there's a card sort, and then a balance exercise we can do as well. So there's things we can do to do that. Another important vocabulary term here is empathy. And as clinicians, I think we all think we're great at empathy, and we probably are. It's one of those skills that probably drives us into this field. It's not one that's easy to train. And so we hope to have it, but being empathic is trying to work with that client from their point of view and their perspective. And it's not always easy when you look at the person and think, I got the solution for you. You just need to make these changes. You got to follow it my way. And so we again, being rooted in the world of substance use treatment, all of our behavioral health interventions are fairly young. Even when we look at the ideas that Freud had as the father of psychology, we're less than 200 years, right?
I forgot to change your, she's bring back to,
Oh,
the
so people aren't
PowerPoint.
getting this.
thank you, Julia Grell, for, you're hearing you, you're just not seeing the PowerPoint.
So probably not share screen.
Just do this. No. Except for I see.
That's where we were. Let's just flash back to the ones before.
Is the audio still good too? Can I check in with everybody online? You're hearing Jeff okay? Since Julia so rudely interrupted us with her observation.
You may not have seen the practice slide. I think we had this one because this is the one that had the video.
Okay. And everybody says the sound is still very good.
All right. Good.
Sorry about that, Jeff.
That's all right. So we're discussing empathy. Like I said, it becomes you have to really wanting to be working with that person and looking beyond the things that brought them in. And so it's easy to judge our clients, but we don't want to do that. I'm not saying that anybody is doing that in a horrible way, but I think in order to be really empathetic, really want to work to hear that person out. The motivation. This is the key. Again, it's motivational interviewing, motivational enhancement therapy. So you really want to try to hone in with that person about what it is that they see as needing to change. And so 2 brief examples would be that person involved in the criminal justice system. So through their substance use, whether it was drinking related OBI arrests or something far more severe, years of addiction, and now there's a felony charge and they're facing prison terms, they might give you little nuggets of I want to change. But it's not easy. And so really trying to figure out with that person what it is. We'll focus on digging into them. Then what is the idea of the change? And so as we work with our clients, we're writing treatment plan goals, we're writing out progress notes. And for every person, you want to look at what are the little steps to make that change. And so we have that chronic substance use person. We don't want to tell them it's okay to continue to use at the level they are, but maybe early on, it's just slowing down. Maybe it's not that tomorrow they come in cured. It's, well, I had 2 days where I didn't drink this week. That's better than last week when I didn't have any. So working with that person to really figure out what it is the change that they want, and trying to figure out what are some digestible measures to do that. You can think back to New Year's Eve and the fact that, most resolutions that people make last the first 2 weeks of the year, and then it's easier just to forget them and say, I didn't do it. But maybe if we can write down that statement of change, share that with other people, and write out digestible pieces for steps along the way, it becomes easier for that person to actually work on creating steps towards progress on that goal. And hopefully in our treatment programs, in our substance use treatment programs, in our behavioral health management programs, we're able to use the client's words to help generate those statements of how they want to change and how they want the change to look, so that there's lots of ownership with them. Then there's the idea of discrepancy, and that's really trying to convey to the client, you say that this is what you want, but this is what I see you doing. And is that going to get you the ultimate change you want? And reflecting back to them on those things. We're going to deal with resistance on this. And so clients have resistance. Sometimes we have to chip and whittle away at that. So when you look at mandated treatment programs, I'm court ordered to be here, there's lots of resistance. When you look at a kid that the parents say, you need to be in this program, they don't want to be, there's lots of resistance. And so we want to piece into that. Well, and then we look at contemplation. And so as we dig into the ideas of the stages of change today, contemplation is one of those first steps in realizing we're ready to start making those changes. The real definition behind contemplation is as the client, as the person wants to make the change, I'm aware of these reasons and I'm starting to think about it. I may not be ready for action. I may not be far enough along that I'm in the maintenance stage, but I'm contemplating. I'm thinking about this. And so if we briefly review the stages of change, I think there's a slide later on that will clarify some of these points. We have pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and maintenance. There's a tool that you can use, Eureka, University of Rhode Island Indicator for Change Assessment. It's public domain, so you just type in URICA, and you should get it. I think it's 32 questions. It's fairly easy to score because there are 4 things you're scoring on: pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and maintenance, by identifying each of the questions. And so it's fairly random, so it's not that the first 4 are pre-contemplation items. There's a little scoring sheet that's connected with it. But it gives you an idea for which level that person is in. And I think a lot of times when you give it to a client on day 1, they think the mere fact that they walked into the door, start filling out the paperwork and working with you means they're already in maintenance. And you're like, I think it's pre-contemplation. As we look at the scores that you have here, that's where you tend to land. But having worked with a lot of clients in substance use treatment programs, when you talk to them and say, tell me where you think you are on these stages of change, they're always in action and maintenance in their own opinion. But when you score the Eureka, they tend to scales of pre-contemplation. So Eureka I didn't include in here. You'd have to take a look at that. I went back. We had the practice slide. As I already mentioned, Stephen Rolnick and William Miller, 2 PhDs, created this. They did a lot of behavioral health research with clients and noticed that by grasping on to the client's reason for change and focusing in on that, working on the resistance, they were able to find that it also worked for smoking, for health. And so some of the hyperlinks that I have built into this presentation that probably aren't going to work to show during the time we have together, but you can watch them outside of this, have a health nurse talking about smoking cessation. There's one about healthy eating for a diabetic and promoting the ideas of the changes they want to make. And then I believe there's a couple on substance use, and then one just on general management of mental health symptoms. And so they're each like 5 minutes, but you can see how it's used in not just the realm of substance use. And the key to this is that it's not always asking questions. A lot of it is the reflection statements back to the person in letting them know that you're listening. So we look at the spirit of motivation. So that was one of those things I talked about, that people say, I have lots of experience, lots of education, I've been to the Motivational Interviewing workshop, my spirit is strong in this. So what we look at are how well can they evoke change? And so the scale of evocation is one of those big pieces. So for those in the room, what could we define that as? Evocation. Well, it's to promote the person talking.
The word evoke.
Yeah.
I was thinking vocation.
No, so you're evoking from them, really getting them comfortable in talking.
Dave is better at provoking people, so maybe that's why he's stumped.
And so that becomes a skill that sometimes we have to think about. How do we do that with our clients? Then the next one that's heavily rooted in the spirit of MI is collaboration. And so we're to look at a collaborative therapy model. What do you think that means? What does that mean for you guys, or what does that mean in your practice? How do we collaborate with our clients?
They're active participants in treatment planning. You know, when we ask for a client quote, like, what do you hope to gain from services? That's part of the treatment plan. It's not just what we think needs to change, it's what
Exactly it, yeah.
they want to change about
Yeah,
themselves.
so Abby was saying it's really working, getting their words, their pieces in that. Stephanie had said it's shared, letting them know this is their responsibility and sharing those pieces and taking what it is. There are, and you know, the field that I started in was the world of substance use. There are a lot of folks long ago that told people you have to do it this way. You have to do it the way that I did. You have to do it because this is how people recover. And over time, we learned maybe that works for some people, but it doesn't work for all of them. And if you're able to have more of a collaborative relationship, that's going to work a little bit better. How would we view autonomy in the therapy relationship? How do we grant our clients some autonomy? What do you find that?
Affirming them
Okay, affirming them.
in terms of their experience, their
Recognizing their ability and right to self-determine.
Okay, and both of those work. Letting them be in the driver's seat too. They can be part of this. And I think as clinicians, as therapists, our clients, especially the ones that are new in this, don't know what to expect. So they sometimes expect to walk in and be told what to do, be given the advice to make their changes. But ultimately, we're kind of like the tour guide. We're showing them around, showing them where they need to make changes, helping them explore those things. And in this lab, working on the skills that they can then do that. So here are the slides that go along with that. So a clinician high in evocation is curious about the client's idea and why change may or may not be good for them. Actively seeking to learn about these ideas. So really working on that relationship and developing that with the clients. And you may end up providing information, but you're not relying on it as the means to help the client change. Actively creating opportunity for the client to engage in their own language or flavor of change. So we talked about some of those things about them being part of that, especially in the treatment plan. On the opposite end, those clinicians low in evocation have only that small interest in the client's input. So I'm not going to dig into that. I'm not going to try to figure out what your reasons for change are. And I might even miss the opportunities to explore those because I'm focused on asking these questions that I have that I need to finish this paperwork. And just, you know, sometimes we might see that as just kind of checking the box, filling out. Hopefully that's not the way we're practicing in 2019. But over the years, some clinicians have done that. Like, this is what I need to do today. This is how we're going to do it. That's kind of low in evocation. We may make assumptions about the client's intent to change or not change. And so I'm just going to assume you're here because somebody told you had to be here. And I'm not even going to dig into that and try to figure those things. I may rely on persistent fact gathering or information, so just the facts, just tell me the yes, no questions. We're not going to get very far with that. So as we dig into the skills, one of them is that idea of open-ended questions, not just the closed-ended yes, no's. And we're going to provide clients with reasons to change rather than eliciting them from them. We're just going to tell you the reasons you need to make change are X, Y, and Z, not listening to what they think that might those clinicians high in collaboration work cooperatively with the client toward the goals of the session. And hopefully that's what we're all doing. If we're not, think about how do we do that? We're not going to rely on that dominance. And I think it's easy to forget how broken some of our people are. And so they see us, they view us as this authority in their life, helping them. And they're going to take everything we say as, yeah, I got to do that. Again, hopefully, as good clinicians, we're not relying on that dominant relationship. But there are a few bad apples out there. I mean, you read the counselor social worker ethical violation, and a lot of times it has to do with this power dynamic.
My favorite part's the quarterly newsletter.
It is fun to read until you know one of the names on my list. Hopefully we're high in curiosity about our clients' ideas and are willing to be influenced by them and willing to let them help change our mind. And we can hold the reins on our own expertise, using it strategically, and not before the client is not ready to receive it. Those that are low in collaboration, again, not working towards mutual understanding, I'm just going to use my own authority and expertise to kind of tell you, this is the way you're going to do it, or I'm going to discharge it because you're not doing the work. I think when I was in graduate school, there was a lot of talk about don't work harder than your clients. And here in the last 10, 15 years, especially as we had the opiate epidemic, and so this has to do some with the substance use world, we started to see these people don't have the strength to do it on their own. And so for a few moments, we might have to work harder at it than them and help show them the way and help move them to get a little bit of buy-in and then start working. And I think the same kind of stuff happens as we look at the trauma that we're now really seeing in all of our people. If we're not recognizing that, we're not recognizing that as the barrier that they're struggling to get through, we're just going to tell them, you got to push through it. It's not going to work. And so when we're collaborative, we're seeing those things. So it talks here about wrestling rather than dancing. I don't know anything about dancing. Stephanie and I took a few lessons before we got married, so we could try to get that first dance right. I don't know that I did it, but you end up, one partner is leading, the other is following. So that's very different than wrestling or judo, where the two people are opposing forces and pushing at each other. And I think if you ever think that counseling session was me fighting or wrestling or pushing against that person, we're probably not doing it right, in that moment. And how do we let that person lead us and we become an active participant in such a change? When we're doing that, we're high in collaboration. We're not. It's the low piece on this. And then the last is really just looking at that autonomy. And we talked about some of these things in the brainstorming about that. But when we're high in autonomy, we're really working to help the client recognize their own choices and what power they have in that, helping to create some optimism about that. And there's a few ways to do that. When we're low in autonomy, we're telling that person he has no choice. There's these external consequences, and that's it. You can do it or not. And so it's that idea of we're going to force it on a person or not. So a big part of that is good listening versus bad listening. So for those of you out in the cyber world, you can add to this discussion. Well, what is bad listening? So in the room, just shout them out.
It's like assuming what your client is going to say and
Oh, wow.
responding.
Responding before it's even time by assuming you know what the client's going to say. You're thinking about what am I going to say to this and not even really paying attention. Yeah, that's one. What else?
Not listening, talking about yourself.
Talking about yourself. Okay, making it all about me. Yeah. Other thoughts. Bad listening.
maybe minimizing what somebody is
Okay,
saying or asking,
minimizing,
you know, you got problems.
Interrupting.
interrupting, yes. Yeah. So on the flip side, well, are we getting anything from cyber world, ideas of bad listening that we haven't already discussed?
Well, no.
Okay, that's all right, we'll move on to good listening. What do you guys think?
They're
good
all
listening-
probably bad listening to us. No.
Maybe, or maybe they muted themselves on chatting.
Yeah.
What is good listening? What does that really look like? Empathizing, okay.
I think it has to do with body language.
Body language, paying attention, facial language. There was something here I didn't hear.
Good eye contact.
Good eye contact. Yeah. So in 2019, what are a few roadblocks that we have done to ourselves that create a bad listening environment? Cell phones. Yeah.
We've got like a mini break between one client to another client. Once that carries over, like going room to room.
Oh, you're saying you don't have a break in between people.
Go back
You're
to
still stuck in the former session.
Yeah, sometimes it's
Or
like
you're in
I have
one
to
session
remember
thinking, what do I have to do with the next? Okay, so not having a break in between people. Okay. Yeah, I think part of both of those things is constant stimulation. The news is always on, the weather is always on, cell phones are always on. You know, take these things to the bathroom with us, and maybe that's our time to catch up. But it's very different just the way we interact with people in 2019 than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So walking into Kroger now, there are lots of folks on their devices or plugged in listening to music, and that's fine. But it's as if they're in a social world, not being social. And we don't even have the opportunity to talk to the clerks anymore because there's digital ways to check out and quickly move on. And so I think as society and human beings evolve, we're losing some of those skills. And I would like to believe that doesn't happen in the moments when we're in a therapy session. But the person that we're working with could also be distracted the same way. And they're staring at their phone or they're looking at, you know, what's happening, or they're thinking, something's going to happen, I'm going to be called right now, or I'm going to get that text. And so sometimes you just need to take a step away and try to identify those roadblocks. Again, hopefully as therapists, clinicians, we have control over that environment. And the person's coming into that, we need to just help them realize this is space for them. So what we want to do to be a good listener, an effective listener, is express empathy back to the person. As they're talking about wanting to make changes and describing those things that they may be ambivalent about, we want to develop the discrepancy. We want to pull those pieces apart. And so we're gonna look at what that really is. And that rolling with resistance really means avoiding argument. I don't know that I've ever argued with a client, but I know that through supervision and working with other clinicians, some have, and a lot of times it goes back to that dominance of the relationship. And I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And I think when we're looking at motivational interviewing, that's not a piece of it. And supporting that self-efficacy of that client, really trying to help them engage. We tried the video and the hyperlinks before, and it didn't work, so we're just going to skip over that.
So we had two people, Jeff. I'm going to jump in. I was
Yeah.
waiting to get clarification.
Go ahead.
Sometimes
I'm
there's
gonna
like
take
a
a
little bit of a lag between when I receive the responses. So two people spoke about documenting during session. And because of the timing issue and you had moved on to what is good listening, I wasn't sure if they were saying that that was a way to affirm and do good listening, or whether they were saying they thought that was bad listening, because I could kind of see that as both. And they're saying it's bad listening, you know, because it's a distraction. You've got your laptop open in front of you, or, you know, your whatever, pen and paper even. But in a way, I can see that almost being a good listening. It shows that you're really making sure you're getting their words right. I don't prefer to do documentation that way though, but I could see it could be affirming for some people. What do you think about that?
So, in the olden days, and so the way I was trained, and many of you, we didn't have electronic records at that time, and so we started with that, the legal pad, and you write Jeff's initials, and you write a couple of things about what's happening in the session. I mean, just think about the Sigmund Freud model of I'm going to sit here with a notebook, I'm going to write some things down. When electronic records became the way, and time management and productivity became more of a clinician's day-to-day affairs, the idea of concurrent documentation really kind of got promoted within the field. And I think it's an unfortunate necessity because we have documentation requirements, and we also don't have a lot of time in between sessions. So if a person, as an example, has an hour-long session with a person and then tells themselves, well, then I should be able to write that note for a half hour or an hour, you're never going to be able to be on par with where you're supposed to be. And I think in some of your interactions with clients, you're writing a field note while you're there, and then you've got the counseling source notes. And so there's sometimes 2 notes for every session. And so I think in much the same way, when we go see our physicians, it's very different now in 2019. And so I'll go see my doctor, and we'll chat for a few minutes. There's a handshake, blood pressure cuff, let me do a pulse, and then the doctor turns away and types away on their computer. And that's really easy for me as a consumer to accept. So in the same way, I think we can accept pieces of that in a therapy session, but I also think it shouldn't be 100%. And so I think when you're doing good listening with a client, it doesn't mean that I'm sitting here typing away at everything they say and never engaging and looking at them. But maybe I even say, hold that thought for just a second. I just want to make a note. That would slow things down. It's probably not the best technique, but every once in a while it's probably okay. But I think to just focus as best you can on how to respond face to face, how to show them that you're listening. We're going to look at some of the skills to do that, and then making your brief note. Because I think it's also good documentation to say, I'm going to capture that. That was a great little piece for this. And I think, the idea of a readiness measure and also a change ruler are good things to discuss with your person. And when you're giving them rating-based questions and they're giving you a number on a scale, that's something that if you don't write it down in the moment, it's easy to forget. But I think it's a valuable piece of the documentation process. So I think you have to figure out a brief balance. So hopefully that addresses the questions that came. But I think you're right. I think documentation, concurrent documentation can be a barrier, and it can also reflect on good listening if we're doing it well. But if we're just focused on this and nothing else, it can turn into a bad listening. Yeah. Any other thoughts in the room that we have here? All right. So we talked about the stages of change. So there's that idea of pre-contemplation, contemplation, and or preparation. So I used to do a little bit of work in the OBI world. And so in order to get an operating a vehicle impaired, sometime you're stopped by a police officer. Whether you had substances on board or not, that tends to be what you're going to admit to or what the proof, the urine or blood alcohol test shows. But operating a vehicle impaired isn't just driving while intoxicated, the old term of DWIs. It can be medications, it can be other chemicals of use and abuse. And sometimes it can be just emotional distress if the person really should not be driving. There's a way that that officer can write it and say, this person's impaired. So when that happens, first offense, you're going to go to jail for 3 days, or you're going to go to a weekend intervention program. And that was one of the programs I worked at. So you can take the illustration of a person that has a harmful relationship with substance. It just hasn't been caught. And so they're not even contemplating the idea of making changes because nothing's happened to get them there. And so we would consider them really in pre-contemplation. They're not even there at the level of contemplation. The police officer is now behind me. I've got these red and blue lights in my rear view mirror. Oh, I'm never going to do that again. So we probably hear that from our clients when they have remorse about something that happened. But we also know it's not easy to maintain some of those changes. And so working with that person, we start to present to them reasons or ideas that they may be actual benefits to make the change. And when they start to take those ideas in, and maybe there's a family member or a significant other or a friend or a coworker or an employer that's also saying, if you don't make these changes, we can't continue to maintain your employment. That might be enough to be like, okay, all these people are giving me ideas, and now I'm starting to wonder, is there something? So contemplation is really just thinking about that, preparing to make a change, but I don't know what to do to make that change. The action is that I actually have started to make a change. And so again, if we look at a harmful relationship with substances, that person may have said, you know what, I drink every day, so a change for me is going to be, I'm going to drink 5 days instead of 7. Or I drink a 6-pack every night, and so I'm going to find a way to move to less than that. Now, we may, outside looking in, say, it's probably not enough. Maybe you need to make bigger changes than that, but they may not be ready for that. But they're still taking an action. Or maybe they say, you know what, I'm going to look for other folks that have struggled with this, and so maybe I seek out a meeting, or maybe I actually even say, without being mandated, maybe I'm going to go explore the idea, talking to somebody about this, or enter a treatment program to see if there's ways to do that. Maintenance comes further on them. This is now somebody that started to make changes, and really they're looking at maintaining, keeping this going. And so if we look at any kind of change in our life, again, if we go back to the idea of New Year's Eve and everybody saying, I want to lose weight, I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to change the way I eat, and again, January 3rd, we're probably back doing what we once were doing because it's not easy to maintain some of those changes. So we had some contemplation, and we thought, you know what, I'm going to do this on January 1, I'm going to take some action, but that doesn't mean because I maintained the change into January 2nd, I'm now in maintenance. Maintenance is maybe 3 or 4 or 6 months down the road. I've gotten that change to stick, and now I'm going to do what I can do to support it. And then we have the idea of relapse. And so relapse means we're going back into this, and we may enter, that relapse from any of these stages. It just means going back to the behavior or back to that harmful use. So the original idea was researcher named D. Clementa. He came up with the model of stages of change, and he still presents. He's been at some of the Ohio state conferences, and he'll talk about how they came up with the stages of change, where they saw this coming and going. They used to just kind of draw a circle and divide it up into 4 pie pieces and say, this is a wheel and it's spinning, and so you're in contemplation, you're in action, you're in maintenance, and you have to sort of go through in the order. You can't really just jump from contemplation to maintenance, but you could fall out at any point and have this relapse. And as they started to look at it, they said, well, maybe instead of it being so linear as a wheel, it becomes more of a spiral. And so it's a spiral, a coil, a spring that has these rapidly coming through. And so sometimes people are in constant changes of flux of contemplation, action, maintenance, going back to pre-contemplation. Maybe because there's things in our life that come and go, and we have struggles in trying to maintain. And so in that same idea, you might fall out at any point and have that relapse. The bigger piece is how do we get back into that change modality and staying there. So that's my brief idea of the stages of change. Go ahead.
All right, so you were saying earlier that you needed something to happen before, like the pre-contemplation stage. Like I guess like something needs to happen for them to kind of be like, okay, well, I need to maybe look at my life or question my decisions or anything like that. So my question is like, in your experience, what does it take? I know that it varies from person to person, but what does it take for someone to get that process started? For example, I have a client who his brother died of alcohol abuse, and that was his closest person. That was his closest, family member, friend, everything. And you would think that that would motivate him to stop, and so he's kind of expressed like, oh yeah, I know I need to like stop doing it on my own, like for my own self. I need to stop doing it. At a certain point, there were AA meetings on site. So to go to one every once in a while. He gets discharged, gets this large sum of money, and just blows it all on alcohol. He gets beat up, thrown in jail, and put back to the nursing home again. So to me, it seems like there's been a lot of huge events, but yet there's no real, to me.
Well, and so it sounds like he just continues to stay stuck in the idea of pre-contemplation. And there isn't necessarily an event that takes a person from pre-contemplation to contemplation. It's the idea of them suddenly saying, enough people, or there have been enough clues this is a problem, that now I'm starting to think maybe it's a problem. And maybe he's even there, because you've said at different times, he said, I need to find out internally what would be ways for me to make these changes. The controlled environment is probably a good thing in a nursing home at this time. So then I think sometimes supporting the idea of, well, right now, you're not drinking. What are some positives going on in your life that you didn't have before? Trying to generate those things to become, so when we look at the decisional balance, whether we're able to get to that today or that goes into November, we're actually going to look at 4 different pieces of that individual's life. The positives of making a change, and also the negatives of making a change. So if drinking is your one social activity and the one thing you have fun, you're not going to have that. And then we're going to look at what are the negatives for not making the change. So what are the pros and cons of making the change and of not making the change? And ultimately, in guiding the discussion, in leading that slow dance and not pushing or forcing, we're going to try to generate more ideas for the positives of the change and the negatives of not making the change, and sort of say, hey, this looks like it's better. Does that make sense? And so we'll try some of those things. But I think that is one of the biggest struggles that we have, is as a provider, as a person involved in trying to help support changes for this person to get better, but seeing them not make those changes, that's hard, that's difficult. And so we might even be able to present to them, hey, it looked like this was better for you. But if they're not willing to see that as being better, we can't force it. We can try to evoke again and try to set the conversation up so that it makes sense for them to see those changes, but it doesn't mean they're going to go that way. But that doesn't mean the way today's session ends, we're going to be in the same place a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now when the next session begins. There's something may happen internally for that person to say, okay, I get that makes sense.
Last question.
Yeah.
Does motivational interviewing only have to do with drugs and alcohol?
No, it does not. And so there's some embedded video clips in here. And I've shared this before, but we couldn't get the audio and the video to work without an echo. But talking about diabetic health changes, the health reasons for smoking cessation. And so we consider that a substance use thing. But then just talking in general about mental health. And so it started in the world of substance use, but it's not a modality that's only substance use specific. I think one of the reasons that it became so popular in the world of substance use treatment and recovery is that a lot of folks are not always walking in looking for the change, especially when you have mandated clients that say, you know, the judge is saying I have to be here. It's easy to say, I don't want to be here. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, for those of you out in cyberland, there on the last slide of this presentation, a bunch of hyperlinks or web links that you can put in to watch some of the videos after, and so hopefully some of that stuff would become clear when you see that too. So the skills that we have in, so let me just take a break. Any other questions floating out there? Okay.
Not that
Or
anybody
any others
asked.
in the room before we dig into some of the skills and where we're at?
Stephanie is really worried about the audio. Everybody online, is everybody online? Were you able to hear Justina's questions well?
It
And
came
Jeff's
undone.
responses to Justina well?
It came undone.
No, you didn't.
That is not why.
Stephanie's just obsessed with the connections on this speaker in
I
front
can
of
say
her.
stuff about Abby too.
That's too loud, probably. It's fine. It's fine. Dave, stop touching it. Everything Justina and Jeff said perfectly, so stop touching it.
Okay, we'll put our hands up.
So sorry for the interruption, everyone. Hey,
It's like being at family dinner.
what is happening? What did you do to it? I've kind of been doing that all along. hasn't
Now
it?
I want to go check that one.
Oh my God. Well, if that is making noise, and that's
This
has
one's blinking. That one's
It should
good.
be.
That one's, I can see the blue light. It's on.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
Nice information. Okay.
No problem. So the acronym that we're going to look at as the skills for motivation interviewing is OARS, O-A-R-S. And so the O is for open-ended questions. The A is for affirming. And I think Stephanie had said earlier, sometimes we want to affirm that person, especially when it's difficult for them to be there. We want to let them know we understand it's hard to be here. And so we'll look at some affirmation statements that we can give to a person to let them realize we at least understand this isn't me. Reflection. Reflection is huge, and I think it's the biggest piece of motivational interviewing. So rather than asking a question, I'm just going to let them go and then reflect back to them. And I think when we look at that active listening skill, reflections can sometimes be the most triggering for the person. Oh, wait a second, they did hear. And then summarizing, you know, there's different ways to summarize as well as there's different ways to reflect. But ultimately, if we're able to take a couple of things they say and put them back together, they're going to feel heard. And they're going to feel like, oh, wait a second, this person really is with me and working things out. So the presentation was designed, again, for groups of folks. And so we were going to have some group exercises to look at open-ended questions and how to ask those things. So we're also going to look at affirmations. So again, just said how to ask things in the open-ended questions. We want to find ways to ask questions. This is pretty much a no-brainer, and if you've been in the field at all, there aren't yes or no questions. And so, sometimes it's saying things like, tell me what brought you in today. Why are you here? And they just have to come up with a little bit more than a yes or a no. And hopefully that gets it started. The affirmations that we have, this is really looking at something that you can give a positive comment to that person about. And so, as we dig into the trauma, realizing that lots of our folks have it, you're really a strong person, a survivor. That might be enough, again, for them to, for a moment, say, oh, Justina's really listening to me. This is somebody I can trust. I can go a little bit further and say a little bit more. And that's ultimately what we want to do in engaging with our clients and just trying to get them to feel connected. I appreciate your openness today and your honesty for coming in. Thanks for coming in today. And giving them a compliment, an expression of hope. I hope this weekend goes well. And when, so they might be talking, dreading, there's this family issue coming up. I don't want to be there. Every time I go to these things, it just brings up negativity and emotions, and I don't want that. I hope this weekend goes well for you, and we'll talk about it when you get back here. I mean, maybe that's a way to affirm to them. We can't judge it yet. Next week we can, but let's see where we go. The summarizing, again, this is counseling 101 stuff, so it shouldn't be new, but it's collecting the material that's been offered, kind of giving it back to them, linking something that was said with something that was discussed earlier, maybe even thinking back to a prior session if you're able to do that. But you don't want to dig too much into it because we already talked about being a good listener is focusing on the person, not sitting thinking, oh, what did we say 3 sessions ago? I want to incorporate that back in. But if you're able to remember something and it just kind of slips in there, I think that's okay. So far, we've expressed concern about your children, getting a job, and finding a safer place to live. And that sounds like a pretty good summary for a session. That sounds a bit like what you told me about feeling lonely. Before I ask you the questions I mentioned earlier, let me summarize what you told me so far to see if I've missed anything important. You came in because you were feeling really sick and scared. And what we're trying to do is get the person to talk. When I was trained, we kind of talked about the counseling relationship being one-to-one. For every time I say something, they're going to say something back. In the world of motivation interviewing, we want it to be the opposite. I might say something, and they're going to say 3 things back. Shifting to talking so that it's more them than me. Because if it's more me, that session may be more about my own stuff than theirs. And I think sometimes that can happen. It can happen even unknowingly. And sometimes that's enough for a client to just stop coming back. Like, I'm just going there for them to get their productivity. And that's not beneficial for them. When we form reflections, these are those statements rather than questions. So you can think of a question, you mean that, cut out the question words, say something like, you mean that, inflect your voice down at the end. If you get it wrong, there's really no penalty. They're probably going to tell you, no, that's not what I meant at all. In general, a reflection should not be longer than the client's statement. So you want to be fairly brief in summarizing that. But really just looking at, and I think another rule of thumb in that we want the person to really have 3 parts of the session and me 1. Every time we ask a question, we probably want to have 3 reflections. So you just think about, scripting a session. And I know nobody audio records their session and dictates them down. But in graduate school, we had to do that. And we had to show, this is a summary, this is a reflection. If you think about the way the session is, that's kind of the way you want to score it. You would want to have far more reflections than actual questions. So, again, being out in cyber world, most of you, this isn't necessarily easy. And even here, it isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do, but what I was hoping is that we would have a couple of groups and have a moment to think about this question. And so the identified client, the identified speaker is talking about how I hope things would be different in my life in 5 years. So really that magical question, what are the things, what are the changes, what are the things I want? And those being the clinician, looking at some affirmations, reflection statements, and summaries that we could do that. So for those of you out in Cyberland, we're going to practice this here for about 5 minutes. But I think for your own world, you can think about a client that had something to say to you about how they hope things would be different in 5 years, and pretend, have that imaginary session where you're giving some affirmations, some reflection statements, and summaries, or just think about some interactions that you had today. How could you have given some affirmation statements, some reflection statements, or some summaries? And so let's try that for a few minutes and see where that goes. So it's on my watch, 37 after. So let's come back at about 42 after. Let's see how that went. Good? Do you want to mute the audio?
I can, yes.
All right. And you guys can
I want to be judge.
So everybody who's logged in online, the sound, we turned off the sound in the room because we're doing the exercise, and you probably didn't want to hear us do that. So just, grab your spouse or your dog or your cat, or, call your neighbor and talk with them about what they expect things to be like in and what did you say, 5 years, Jeff?
5 years.
Okay, so I'm muting us again.
Sure enough, he had diabetes.
Go figure, on a mid-life met.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, you've got our full attention.
All right, so for those of you not here, in the group, we had 3 different conversations.
It appears that your screen stopped sharing, Jeff.
Oh.
Can you type something?
I want to be in line.
Well, I flipped back to the slides.
So I may,
Something, Jeff.
this might be a time, Stephanie, to check the speakers. For sure.
Oh my God.
Abby told me I can't touch them anymore, but I do want to go play with that one. That's the only one I haven't played with.
All right, we're good.
Concerned about the sound, I don't know if the speakers work.
So here in the room, there was just some general conversations about client care, but I observed and heard a few things. And so one of the things I thought of is that, so this 2 hours of us looking at motivational enhancement therapy, you guys are seasoned clinicians, some of you more so than I. And so the idea of me teaching you something brand new is not at all what we're looking at. Instead, what we're trying to look at is the awareness of some of these things, and the awareness of how to use them and plug them into where we're at. So a common theme that I heard, and I don't want to, put it out there too much, is that it's easy to struggle with our folks that aren't making the changes. And it's easy to get wrapped up in that and stuck in thinking, I don't know what more we can do. We're giving them information. We're trying to help them make those changes, and they're not there. And that really is a place where we would hopefully be able to use this and focusing on some of those things. And so what we may need to do is really drill down on, is there one little thing we can affirm them on, between this session and the next? And then as we provide some of that positive feedback, is there a way to help move some of those things along? I also heard somebody even use the quote blanketed statement, what I hear you say is X, Y, Z. And I think when having those client conversations, it's not that they haven't been hearing us before, but I think when we sometimes plug it in that way, again, sometimes for those folks, it's enough to be like, oh, yeah, they really know what's going on. So from your perspective, so again, this is sort of a conversation in the room, but those of you outside can join in too. As you're looking at those skills, and not necessarily the practice of, but open-ended questions, affirmations, reflection statements, and summaries, how did that feel? Again, I don't think we're trying anything new here. If we're just focusing on those things, how does that feel? So just general dialogue. What do you guys think?
I felt very cared for by Lonnie.
Okay. Dave was very cared for by Lauren. She was the one that I heard what I hear you say.
Yeah, I didn't lose it though.
It looked like you were.
But as the potential client, you felt heard.
That was the fine. Yeah. I was sorry that you cut our therapy session short.
Well, all right.
I feel like I was making progress.
Hopefully your bill reduces correspondingly.
What else? Other thoughts?
I think body language is definitely very important. When I was a client, I think seeing my clinician's interest in what I was saying just really helped me to bring everything out. So that was very notable.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Anybody out there try it at their house? Okay.
Yes.
So there's different types of reflection statements. The simplified reflection is really just parroting back exactly what you're hearing. An amplified reflection is potentially exaggerating that or giving some intensity. So quitting drinking is not something you thought about. Get that using my hands. Try not to talk with my hands this time. So exaggerating that by saying to the person, so you've never really thought about quitting drinking. So this individual you got, maybe you just throw that out there. No, I've thought about it. I just don't know what to do. Oh, okay, so there's a piece to this that you want. Or drink's just something you're gonna do for the rest of your life. Yeah, it is. Or, well, no, I guess when I get older, it won't be as important. But that's not reflecting exactly back what they said, but it's changing it a little bit. Maybe changing it, so you're kind of throwing them something they gotta respond to. Because they're gonna tell you yes or no, you're wrong, or, oh, well, I haven't thought about it that way. Okay, what do we need to think about? How do we make that work? There's the idea of the double-sided reflection. So on one hand, you're telling me this. So since we had the opiate epidemic, parents both sides, it's not just the female or male. Children's service involved, the kids are gone, I want to get my kids back. On one hand, you're telling me your kids are the most important thing, you want to do them. On the other hand, are you really demonstrating some of the behaviors of so developing that discrepancy, reflecting it back, they might have just been telling you, no, 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 everything is, this is what I want, this is what's the most important thing. Okay, I hear you saying that, but are you demonstrating that? And sometimes, again, that's enough to sort of be the, oh, I do need to make a change as the client has seen it. So has anybody ever had that, had an experience in using a exaggerated or amplified reflection or using a double-sided one? Have we tried those before? Sure. How does that work? Or give me an example. Lonnie, you said sure.
I've got one. I've got the client who wants to be more independent, wants to be able to use her manual wheelchair on her own. To do that, she needs to go to physical therapy, but she doesn't want to go to physical therapy. There's an excuse every day why I have a headache. I don't want to go. I think I've got a UTI. I didn't sleep well last night. My stomach hurts. I think I might need to poop. And so they stop asking her after a while, but she still feels like I want to get in my wheelchair and push myself around.
People in therapy would work with me.
That's why don't they ask me anymore? It's like, so you're never going to go to therapy? No, I want to go to therapy. When are you going to go to therapy?
So how did she respond when you use that exaggeration?
She felt like I was challenging her. She felt like I was confronting her. Why do you ask me these things? You know my problem. Sorry.
Well, but do you think that gives you a little piece of her internal motivation to grab onto, and as you're working that, is she gonna suddenly, when she's not with you, potentially see that as a moment? I don't know.
Right. In the moment, it feels like whack-a-mole. In the moment, it feels like we're just.
The discrepancy is she's not going. She's saying she's going to go, but she's not, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Trying to learn here.
Yeah.
Right.
Discrepancy.
So the discrepancy is.
You're saying this, but
But
what
you're
you're
doing
doing
this.
is.
Yeah. When I do that, I tend to think of it as a reality therapy technique, and so I am trying to
It probably is.
drive home the reality of the situation. So when I use that skill, I might be wording it slightly differently than a motivational, like a purely motivational, coach kind of standpoint would. I don't know, maybe there's a difference in the wording, but I think my clients often feel like I'm accusing them of not doing well enough. Because I am kind of accusing them of not doing it well enough.
Right, but you gotta be careful that line.
I know.
But sometimes for me, I say, I'm really confused. So that's what I usually say. I usually say, I'm really confused. I hear you saying this, however, the last 3 days or from the last time we spoke, you're doing this. Can you help me get some clarity about that? And then, they say whatever it is.
Hey, help me understand
Yeah.
where this is.
Usually if I say I'm confused, then they're like, what are you confused about? Like, oh wait, okay, I'm confused too.
It's pretty honest that I'm not doing what I say I'm gonna do.
Exactly. So that usually takes off confrontation piece.
Julia Grove says, I'm hearing this and I'm seeing this. Help me to understand how this helps you.
And
She says.
has she had good results with that?
Julia, have you had good results with that? Get faster, Julia, we're all waiting.
No pressure, Julia. Well,
Moderate, she says.
Was there a second one?
No,
Okay, so two. Didn't want that.
we need you saw two. What do you see?
It comes down and then it says one and then it says two.
That was her response. Probably
Okay.
when she said moderate. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I didn't know you could see that.
Yeah, you can tell Abby she needs to pay attention.
So again, I'm not at all saying that we're not using these techniques. Some of it is the awareness or thinking about, is there a little bit, so when we have a client that we're identifying has these ambivalent feelings about the changes that they say they want to make. So again, this is to say, motivation interviewing isn't for all clients in all situations. It's really specific, the idea of ambivalence. Can we try these things and look at some of that? Again, you know, we'll be back in November with some actual like case study pieces, and then we'll try to have some set up triads throughout here and the internet to practice some of those things. And we'll actually specifically try some role plays to see where we can take some of these. The levels of reflection, again, there's just that repeat. If you rephrase something, you're changing it a little bit. So basically what I hear and sort of summarizing, but maybe you mix some of the words around so it's not just an exact parrot back. And then paraphrasing it, changing it, maybe not even twisting the meaning, but maybe changing it a little bit. So for you guys, how would you describe maybe a difference between repeating and paraphrasing? Anyone?
I assume repeating is literal, and paraphrasing, you put a variation. So like, I'm going to the store, I repeat, I say I'm going to the store. I say I'm going to the store, it makes it, like shopping.
Maybe taking a guess at what the further meaning.
Interpreting it.
Yeah.
Or translating it.
How does that?
So, for another 5-minute exercise. So, identified client, maybe staying the same, maybe not, but this is the idea of the speaker. What I'd like you to do is discuss something you feel two different ways about. Not on the fence. Maybe not necessarily a personal issue, Dave. Something you haven't firmly
Those are the only kind I got.
something you haven't firmly formed an opinion on, and as the clinician that's working with you, see if there's a way to repeat, rephrase, paraphrase, or use one of those amplified or exaggerated summaries and see where we can go. So we can stop the audio for about 5 minutes. And so it's about 5 pills, so we'll be back at the hour.
I'm not here. So once again, people online, please find your spouse, your cat, your friend, and practice this at home.
and so stressing, tell you.
So we've got audio.
Yep, you're live.
All right, so we're back on. So, I actually ran out while this group was going on, so I didn't listen in the same way I had during the first session. What did you guys think about that? Any feedback on how the reflections, amplified reflection, or paraphrasing worked? Is there anything worked well, felt well?
It worked well. It felt a little bit awkward because I was trying to find a place to throw it in. It felt a little bit like,
How did it feel to you, Justin?
I didn't see the roughness, like, I guess I was so,
you didn't see me shopping for my opportunity.
no, I didn't, I thought that, like, I was trying to, or maybe I was trying to, like, answer the question. But I thought, like, it felt more like you were trying to understand me versus get an opportunity to be scripted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us, I mean, I can't, that was fairly obvious the first time around that I was the client, Ronnie was the therapist. And now it felt like a collegial interaction, which we discussed during the business as to how best to approach counseling or psychotherapy. And I don't know if Ronnie just did that without you actually engaged in the conversation. I have no idea.
I thought we were completely off task.
That's what I Well, but we did discuss something that we were.
Yes, we did.
And it felt like we.
That what?
The speaker's
Did you
okay.
do this?
You're unmuted. Oh, yes. Nobody heard what you were talking about during the thing, yes. Stephanie must have been talking about something really juicy.
Yeah.
Potentially. All right, any other thoughts? So if we were to look at some closed-ended questions and try to figure out what are the open-ended ways to say them, if I threw out, how many children do you have? How could you change that into an open-ended question?
Did you reproduce a lot?
Tell me about your family.
That's exactly what it says. You have the same sheet that I do.
I didn't read
I
it,
didn't
I
put it on
swear.
there. I'm kidding. First, I'd like you to tell me about some marijuana use. On a typical day, how much do you smoke? How would we turn that into an open-ended question?
Tell me about your marijuana use.
During a week, during a day. How long ago did you have your last drink? Is there a way to make that into an open-ended question?
We drank recently?
I can't think of it.
I'm not sure how we could go.
Tell me about the last time you did it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so there's a pattern here. It starts with Tony. All right, go on,
When
Dad.
do you plan to quit cutting?
Tell me about your plans to quit cutting. No, that doesn't sound good.
Tell me about what happened before you were cutting.
Okay, that could be one.
Mary's good at this.
Or,
You
what do you think you want to do about your cutting?
Stop doing it?
Some of the ways that clients resist. So we didn't brainstorm this before, but what are some of the ways that clients resist what we're doing? Okay.
Just call other people into the room.
But, I mean, in general, that's probably some denial. There may be the minimizing piece to that, making excuses, blaming, disagreeing, even just the idea of pessimism. Never going to change.
Avoidance, Mark Stickle says.
Reluctance, unwillingness to change. I mean, that's some of the way they just deny and create their resistance. What are some of the other ways they create
Can
resistance?
you like go give me my urinal?
So talking,
That's my favorite
like changing the subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something entirely
Ordering you around the room.
So in some aspects, that may be the ignoring or sidetracking you, not giving you a response.
Can you
no
please get
answer,
my nurse?
contention.
Giving you all the reasons that suggestions won't work.
Yeah,
Like, I can never do that because X, Y, and Z.
And so if we started to notice some of those resistance pieces, again, maybe that's a way to say, okay, there may be a little bit of ambivalence here. Let's dig in. If we were to try to evoke and had some statements to go along with that, any ideas about how we might evoke some problem recognition, or some ways to phrase or ask that?
Sometimes just an observation.
Okay.
You know,
So reflecting back on what you see.
Yeah, I notice that every time I bring this subject up, all of a sudden you're interested in what's going on the television.
Okay. Yeah. In what ways has this been a problem for you? What things make you think that this is a problem, or what make you think everybody else sees this as a problem? Why would they say these things? I'm making them up.
Maybe I had issues with this in the past.
Yeah. Is this become a new thing, or has this always been around? Expressing some concern. So in the same way, what is it about this behavior that you or other people might see as reasons for concern? So that may be a substance use behavior. It may be the self-harming behavior. It may be the not taking medication behavior. So what do you think about not taking your medication that other people might see as a problem? What worries you about not taking your medication? In what ways does that concern you? So evoking sometimes like digging into it, really trying to focus in on pieces. So in that couple of minutes before the break, I just found those and thought, well, let's just add that in where we are. In digging in, trying to evoke the change talk, you're looking at the disadvantages of staying safe. So as we look at this decisional balance in a minute, what worries you about your current situation? What makes you think that you need to do something about your blood pressure? What difficulties or hassles have you had in relation to your drug use? In what ways does this concern you? What has stopped you from doing what you want in life? What do you think will happen if you don't change anything? What happens then? So that's really looking at the negatives of staying sane. The advantages of making a change. How would you like things to be different? What would be good things about losing weight? So I think there was a client discussion about that. See if there's a way for them to generate some positives about that. What would you like your life to be like 5 years from now? So in the same way, that little practice question we had. If you could make this change immediately by magic, how might things be better for you? The fact that you're here indicates at least part of you thinks it's time to do something. There's a little bit of an affirmation there. What are the main reasons you see for making a change? What would be the advantages of making this change? You might look for some optimism about that change. What makes you think that if you decide to make a change, you could do it? So we're going to look at the readiness ruler in a minute, and that's a key to that piece. The confidence in making a change. What encourages you that you can change if you want to? So if we took the example of that OBI person needing to make some changes because the judge says so, and the wife says so, and the kids and the boss say so, but they haven't decided that maybe they need to make some changes, what encourages you can change it? They haven't grabbed onto that, there really may be some low confidence in making changes. So how do we support that? You know, what are the resources we would give to that client to assist in those kinds? What do you think would work for you if you decided to make changes? when else in your life have you made a significant change like this, and how did it go? So I think we talk about, not only the history of the problem, but what have you tried before that helped you make some changes? And what did that look like? So I think, the client that Justina had, there was a person that had some family issues with substance use, was in the nursing home, wanted to make changes, made some changes, and then left the nursing home and came back because they went back to the substance use behavior. So, what was going well for you before? What did you like when you were in this controlled environment, not using? There must have been some positive things. Is it easier for you to wake up in the morning? Is that a good thing? Is it what you like? What personal strengths do you have that will help you succeed in this? So there's just some ways to plug into trying to get to that. So that leads us into the decisional balance. And so for those of you on computer, it's a box, it's a square. And so you just divide it up into 4 quadrants. So here it is. So we go like that.
Let me zoom in on that. Now, where are they finding this?
I'm going to give it to you.
Oh,
We're going
okay.
to scan it in.
So they're not finding it yet, okay.
Yeah. So they're just going to see it on my screen as long as it's
How is he
right
doing
there.
That is magic, I noticed that. Now, for whatever reason, Zoom inverts the image, so everything is written backwards for people online. I don't know why it does that, but.
Really, you're making a grid. 4 boxes. It's easy to just draw this out on a piece of paper with a client and to say, we're going to take a look at a decisional method. You're giving me some stuff about a change that you're not sure of, right? So we're in that same way about we're reflecting, we're talking, we're just putting it on a piece of paper in front of the client. So let's create 4 different boxes. What we want to look at are the cons, reasons not to make this change. So,
Christina Scott says that you can Google decisional balance
Yeah,
worksheet and you'll find it immediately. Google image search decisional balance worksheet.
and it's probably a cleaner copy than I have.
Yeah.
But so in that first box, you're going to generate down good things about continuing drink as before. So this one's related to drinking, but really you just cross that off, white it out. Good things about continuing to do this behavior as before. Then really start to have a conversation with the client. Try to fill that box up with as many things as you can. And then the pros. So what are some not so good things about drinking? Positive reasons to make the change. I don't like it. Well, if you do like it, but you don't like feeling in the morning, it's expensive, you're getting yourself in trouble. And so sometimes you might have to generate some ideas here, but it's a conversation. And so, because what you want, again, is to focus on the positives for making a change and the negatives for not making a change. So what are some not so good things about changing my behavior? Well, it's my only way to socialize. I'm not going to have that anymore. My only way to disconnect from reality is I'm not going to have that anymore. I like the taste. I'm not going to have that anymore. Yeah, the self-medication, it controls my emotions. What are some good things about changing my drinking? Well, I'm not going to have to go to the bathroom. I'm not going to feel sick in the morning. I'm not going to have that burning throat. Some of my other medical conditions, the doctor says maybe I shouldn't be drinking on. So I can take my meds at night because I'm not, combining them. So depending on what you would get in the Google search, it may or may not have drinking written into there. But really what you're looking at is if you stay the same and don't make changes, what's good about that? What's bad about that? And then making a change, what's good about that? What's bad about that? As the clinician, as the person steering or leading that band, you want to try to make it look better to make the change or the negatives of not making the change as best you can evoke some of those ideas. So that's a decisional balance sheet. So in November, again, we'll pull these out and try to have some of those role plays and try to actually plug in some stuff. We won't do that tonight. Developing discrepancy. So I mentioned earlier a readiness ruler. And at different times, so in 2008, 2009, then it was ODATIS and ODMH. If you remember, before they combined and became Ohio Moss. They printed off actual rulers. And, you know, however many you wanted, you get. It was like a plastic ruler, and on one side, it was the readiness ruler. And so it was just 1 to 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. So you could take it out and actually put it in front of a client and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you feel you are to make this change? And so you use this at the end of the session. You know, we've spent an hour talking about you have these things you need to make changes about. You're not sure, you're on the fence. We've given you some reasons. You've come up with some reasons. We put this all together. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 not at all important, 10 the most important thing for you, how ready are you to make a change? And you let them give a number. And if you disagree with the number, you might say, well, why wasn't it? So they give you a 7, right? I'm readiness for a 7. Why wasn't it a 6? And you let them, again, tell you why it's so important to them that it's a 7 and not a 6. Again, they're generating, putting out the ideas. It's not you saying it, so that they can then say, okay, maybe it is more important. Maybe I really need to get my kids back. Maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need to do that. We would flip the ruler over. What confidence do you have in making the change? 1, not at all confident. 10, you're very confident in making that change. And so this one helps you try to figure out what supports do they already have. I'm pretty confident because I've already got family supporting me. I've already got meetings and support groups that I can go to that help me think about taking my medication and not cutting and doing this and using some pro-social skills. Or they're giving you, I'm struggling with that. I don't have any confidence to make a change. I have a 3. So why didn't you give me a 5? Well, again, they're giving you the reasons that they need to work on, trying to create some additional confidence by saying, I don't have anybody else doing this. I don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of other than you, and I don't see you every 2 weeks. So nobody's here to support me in this change. And then that becomes sort of a focus for what can we do to bring up supports for you, and so that you can have more on that. So that makes sense, the readiness ruler. Unfortunately, over years, I've given out all those rulers and I don't have an example, but it's the same kind of thing. You just draw it on a piece of paper, or it's a conversation. And on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you rate this as? And so, as I mentioned earlier, I think to me, that's one of those things. Well, I'm going to write that down right now. And then not exactly familiar with your electronic record system, so I don't know if you can always pull up last week's note when you're in front of a person. And some of that probably has to do with the internet and where you are and which building. But if you are, the minute they walk into the session following, hey, last time we talked about this, and you had a confidence rating of 3. And we talked about some things that it could increase your confidence in making this change. Where are you right now at the beginning of this session before we talk about it? Get that rating. And then, so you flipped it, you asked the confidence, and then how important is it to you right now? Now, sometimes they're going to give you that BS. Oh, I made the change already, so it doesn't have to be important at all. Well, okay, tell me about that. You know, and challenging them to give you some examples, to give you some information about where that is. And then you spend that session exploring goals, exploring their values. And so I also have with me this personal values card sort. And since we only have 10 minutes of this left, we're going to focus on this next month. And so Abby already has this, so we'll find a way to send that out and distribute it. It is something that has virtually close to 100 different values And so you print these on paper, you cut them out, you make a little stack, and then in working with the clients, you have 3 different piles, one that's very important, one that's important, one that's not important. You start sorting these cards with you maybe handing them a card, reading it to them, describing what it is, and it's things like acceptance, and there's a definition there, and accuracy, and achievement, and adventure. So ultimately you end up with 3 different stacks. And this one's my most important, this one's important, this one's not important to me. And then you start looking at that whole topic of change. And you start looking at things in here about, you said that these were all important for you. So important, most important things for you. How do we move this change to get you there? And you start digging into some of those pieces. And so again, we'll do some examples. We'll play with that. We'll try to do that. I'll do a role play with somebody, to set it up so we can have an example of that, and we'll try it. And then the brainstorming that Stephanie and I have done about this is that we'll sort of assign through Stephanie and Abby, picking 2 or 3 people and linking them over the web. Okay, we could do that too. Stephanie says you could sign up in pairs so that you'll end up in our 5-minute or 10-minute breaks finding a way to do a Skype or a phone call or whatever to practice some of these skills back and forth. The card sort, you may have to do a virtual, and just use the words and create a list. But we're going to try some of these things and dig into them and hopefully developing some of those skills. So for now, that's sort of setting up where we are next month. When we're looking at the role of rolling with resistance, what you don't want to be doing is arguing. You don't want to be denying the person's feelings or negating those. You don't want to ignore or interrupt them. And so instead, using your reflections, shifting the focus to something that may go back to the change. And sometimes, as somebody already alluded to, they're shifting the focus to say, empty my bedpan or take me to the med person. And unfortunately, you give them some of that control, but it's also, well, it sounds like this isn't a good time to talk. Should I come back at a different time? Reframing some of those things in agreement with a twist. We can't agree on this, but what if we tried it for a week? Is that something you could do? Is there a way to put a little game in there, emphasizing their personal choice and control? So again, when you have the mandated counseling client, it's either this or I go to jail, so I don't have a choice. Well, you do, so tell me, what are some of the choices you have? Well, I gotta go to jail or I gotta see you, that's it. No, there's other choices. Think about them. What are some things you could do? And really trying to get them to think about it and not giving them those choices and kind of coming alongside with them, moving along with them. So we already talked about the readiness rulers, and then there's a video that uses some of those in some of those non-substance use clinical situations. Again, talking about making some health changes, talking about utilizing resources, and then also smoking cessation and changing some other behaviors. There's another acronym here, the DARN C, and so it's looking at, these are ways as people start to talk about wanting to make the change. Do they have a desire? Do they have the ability? So that idea of the confidence to make the change. Do they have a reason to make the change? Do they have a need to make the change? And are they giving you any kind of commitment to this? They throw out some of those things that relate to that. Those are the things you want to gravitate towards and say, I just heard you say this. Let me talk more about that. So again, we'll review that next month and see if there's a way to do that. Mia Step is that supervision model. That's where I pulled a lot of things. And again, this is my list of video clips. As we're wrapping up here, questions, comments, concerns, things that we can discuss in the last 5 minutes.
Christina Scott found a link to do an online values card sort. So I'm sending that to you, Jeff, so you can take a look and see if you want me to include that for next month's presentation. So people at home can do that sort of on their own. But I think Bill Hanlon said he likes the idea of doing FaceTime buddies. So maybe I can find a way to organize that.
FaceTime buddies.
Yeah, normally when people are attending online now, we don't ask them to register in advance, but maybe if we did, I could then pair them off as they respond, or.
Maybe they don't need to register, maybe they just need to connect. Maybe they.
Well, that's
just
what I
need
mean, but once they're logged in and the webinar is underway, it will be kind of hard to,
Yeah.
connect them. So like ideally, I would do that ahead of time. If people could just let me know they're planning to come, we'll have to think, we'll brainstorm a way to do that. Yeah, we'll find a way to do a buddy
We
system.
have it on the calendar already, so.
It is on the company
give me
calendar,
a
but
reminder.
yeah, nobody really wants that. Even I don't look at that. I'm the one that sends out the announcement emails
It was the last slide.
because he ended it.
So did you guys talk about sending out this video for everybody?
If they have the electronic, it's already there, and they had to pay for,
So the
so they
link-
might just have to type it in.
Yeah, the links are in there, and so when I send out the recording email next week, everybody, I did find a PDF of that square thing, whatever we're calling that. I can't think of the word already. So
Decisional balance.
decisional balance sheet. So everybody will get that when I send out the recording next week, along with a copy of the PowerPoint, so you have those links and everything. And then next month's webinar is on, what is it, 14th?
Sounds about right.
13th, I thought.
Hold on, Google Calendar, here we go. Anybody know? Shout out, otherwise I'm gonna.
What was the question?
What date is that?
It's the 14th.
What's the word?
Thursday the 14th at 5:30.
So I guess 3 items.
Mm-hmm.
So take a look at the decisional balance that someone said we could Google. I'll take a look at the values card sort online, but I'll also share scans of these images with Abby so she can send them tomorrow. So there's readiness ruler notes, and there's some other things that you can just put into your little motivational interviewing packet. But then I would also like you to think about some potential client situations where clients are currently ambivalent. I have examples.
I have examples.
They're not good. They're made up, and I've used them for years. But if you're able to submit through Abby in the next 2 weeks some ideas of client scenarios, again, no client identified information, we'll try to actually do some role playing in here where, not to scare people away, but I'll be the clinician and somebody else would act out the role. And we'll do that on the video screen, and then we'll have, what do we call it, a Skype buddy, a Google buddy, a Zoom buddy?
Some kind of
We'll have that to
trans-technological
practice
yes.
some of those things about some of the identified situations. So take this client situation,
Cyber friend.
role play it out,
Mhm.
see where it
Everybody.
goes. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do next month, and we'll go from there. That's exactly what
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for a wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Jeff.
Slowly panning back to me. Everybody online, you should have your evaluation form in your counseling source email. You must complete that in order to receive credit. Those are due next week. I can't remember if I said Wednesday or Thursday, but hey, there's no reason you can't just turn it in tonight. So, please send those back to me promptly, and I will get everyone's certificates out definitely next week, as long as I've got them all, and we'll get your attendance recorded with. And if you're more than 2 weeks out, oh good, you're screwed. If you're more than 2 weeks out, you don't get credit. Sorry, Stephanie's doing this motion, so you're in trouble big time.
The foot is down.
The foot is down. But thank you so much, Jeff, and I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. So anybody who has any follow-up questions can email myself, and I can get those to Jeff.
Yeah,